Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for a Sober in Seattle podcast today. We're super lucky to have Philo here visiting Seattle, who got sober in Seattle, and we're going to talk to him about getting sober in Seattle. He's here for his high school reunion. So tell us about your high school reunion, Philo.
Well, my name's Philo. I'm an alcoholic. And I think, our class motto was the 82 Brew Crew. So everybody liked to party. And I think at my high school reunion, it's 40 years later, at some point I said something to somebody about, well, one day at a time. And then somebody said, oh, did you say one day at a time? And then turned out, oh, I'm a member too. Yes, I'm a member. And it turned out there was a little pods of a pod. Either it seems like we're in AA now, or we're still drinking. And but it's White Center. We're Rat City kids, so it's like, that's what would you expect?
The same with my high school class too. It's kind of amazing that we even made it through high school.
It's amazing I made it through high school, although I think alcohol saved my life. I don't know that I would have made it through my family in junior high and high school had I not been a little medicated. You know what I'm saying? So
I absolutely do. Absolutely. So tell me about, so you grew up in Seattle?
I did. I'm from White Center, which we all know is not so white and not so central. Or, I don't know, maybe that's not as true now as it once was, but yeah, it wasn't a place I wanted to be from, but it's where I'm from, and I don't think I knew what alcoholism was because it's like I was just soaking in it, and what, like somebody said when I was new, like if alcoholism runs down one side of your family, you're 60% more likely to become an alcoholic. And I was like, well, it runs down both sides of my family, so I'm 120% more likely to become an alcoholic. So, I didn't know what alcoholism was. My grandfather sat at the kitchen table from the moment he woke up in the morning to the moment he went to bed with a can of Coors beer in his hand. And I would come by and I would hold it, and it was always cold. And I'd be like, it's still cold, Grandpa. And he'd be like, I know, it's magic, and I'd be like, I didn't know that can of Coors beer was constantly rotating all day long. And is that alcoholism? I don't know. It's just my grandpa. And the same with everybody else in my family. It's like everybody drank, and they drank alcoholically. So if and you got this disease that tells you you don't have this disease, and then if everybody else around you has it too, it just seems normal. It just seemed normal to me.
Yeah, me too. I had a hard time admitting that my life was unmanageable because it was just the way it always was. What do you mean my life's unmanageable? Anyway, yeah, I totally think I understand what you're saying with that. I didn't have a problem admitting I was an alcoholic, but unmanageability was another story. So I know you got, because we've talked a little bit before this, but I know you got sober pretty young, but can you tell us, when did you start drinking?
I started drinking at 11. I was a teenage alcoholic. I saw Sarah T. Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic. It was on ABC After School Special starring Mark Hamill and Linda Blair. Remember that? And and what I got out of it was like, oh, she's taking booze in Tupperware containers to school with her. What a great idea. I don't think that was the message that ABC was going for, but it was like, it's that thing with like this disease of perception. Like I can find a reason to drink in an AA meeting if I'm looking for it, but it's like if I'm going. So anyway, I was a teenage alcoholic. I drank all through school. I graduated from high school, which was a bit of a kind of a major miracle. And I started drinking at 11 and I got sober at 22.
Right on. Well, so you got sober in Seattle. What were some of the first, where'd you get sober at?
I got sober at the Capitol Hill Alana Club up on 15th Street when it was in the Yellow House. And And there was a cast of characters there. They were taking us to the noon meeting every day. And so I saw the same people. And back then everybody had names too, like Cowboy Tom and like, Big Book Robert. And, all these people had these funny little names. And there was this guy, Directions Doug, who drove me absolutely insane because he would say the same thing over and over at every single meeting I ever saw him at, which was every day. His hand would go up and I would just get like triggered, like, no, don't call, don't call on him.
Yeah.
And he was from the South and he'd say the same thing. And there weren't timers back then either, like now there are sometimes. So he would just rant, go on, and he'd say, my name's Doug and I'm an alcoholic and I'm here to tell you all about the directions in Alcoholics Anonymous. And directions are you go to meetings. You don't drink or use between these meetings. You get a sponsor, you call your sponsor. You get a big book, you read your big book. And if all else fails, you follow these directions, which are you go to meetings. You don't drink or use between these meetings. You get a sponsor, you call it. I mean, he would go on for 5 or 10 minutes sometimes until I attacked him in the kitchen, and I was just screaming at him like, Doug, we know what the directions are. We're alcoholics, we're not stupid. We all love a little drama in AA. So a crowd had gathered because the newcomer is attacking Doug. Let's watch. So everybody was there, like watching.
That's hilarious.
And he reviewed them and he said, I'll make a deal with you, Philo. If you start actually doing the directions, I'll stop sharing about them. And everyone's eyes got wide, like I had been given the key to save us all, like, please, Philo, please stop this madness. And I said I would, and everybody cheered. And, and the next day, Doug was there and he was sharing about the directions. And I bolted for the door because my MO was always, well, if you hurt me or you piss me off, watch me hurt me, and then you're really going to suffer. Which makes no logical sense whatsoever. But I just bolted for the door. But, this woman named Tiny grabbed me by the back of the neck and slammed me into the chair next to her and said, don't you leave, we're talking after the meeting. Or I don't know if I would have been alive today. These little moments that happen sometimes in Alcoholics Anonymous are life changers.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened with Tiny?
Oh, Tiny said, well, first of all, she said, Philo, I'm worried about you. And one, I was shocked that she knew my name. And two, it had been a long time since I heard anybody say they were worried about me. Not that there weren't people that were. I had just, I was like tornado tearing through the lives of people, engaging in all kinds of madness and street kids stuff and prostitution and whatever. I was a disaster. So it's like I hadn't seen a lot of people for a very long time. But anyway, she said that. So I was listening. And she said, Philo, I'm worried about you because you're so damn smart, kid. I'm worried you're going to think your way right out of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because you have to be stupid to believe that showing up here for an hour and a half or an hour and saying a little prayer and, doing a little writing is going to change your life beyond your wildest dreams. Gosh, you have to be stupid to believe that, she said. But, I hope next time you're outside and the wind's blowing and it just blows right through you because there ain't a lot there. I don't know if that hole inside you has always been there, but it's just gotten bigger and bigger, she said, but the next time you're outside and the wind's blowing and it blows right through you, I hope you're stupid enough to believe that Alcoholics Anonymous can fill that back up for you. She said, because it has for me. And I looked in her eyes and I knew exactly what she was talking about. I could see that she didn't have, okay, I believe you, And I said, tell me about your drinking. And she said, well, finally, I got this problem called the phenomenon of craving. And what it looks like is once I put alcohol in my body, this thing goes off that's just like more, 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 more and becomes louder and more important than everything in my life. And I'm like, oh my God, Tiny, you know exactly what you're talking about. And then she said, you know, I also got this weird mental obsession. Like I could have a can of beer in my hand and start to feel more comfortable just knowing I have it in my hand. And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And the more she talked about it, her disease of alcoholism, that I finally got like, oh my God, Tiny, I'm an alcoholic. And she said, we know, you know, and everybody had known. They knew in junior high, they probably knew in high school, you know, people had known for years. But I didn't know until somebody carried a message of depth and weight to me that nobody carried to me before. And that happened at the Capitol Law Club in a noon meeting, you know, with a woman I had nothing in common with, you know, Native American, I think. And I
Mhm.
guess like, what do we have in common? You know, we have alcoholism in common. And boy, what a huge, huge thing that is.
Absolutely. That's what makes us Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yep.
Different from other 12-step programs. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm reading a book about, you know, how important it is to the identification to belong to in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, sometimes I hear speakers, I mean, these days I live in Los Angeles, and so in Los Angeles is the home of the 1 hour speaker meeting, you know, so it's like 1 hour, one speaker, they talk for 40 minutes. It's easy, I think, for people to get a little lost sometimes here. Yeah, it's good to find those smaller meetings, you know, you have to go out and look for them sometimes, but it's like, so once in a while you hear these speakers are like, we all know how you drank. I didn't get here from eating too many ice cream cones. And I'm like, oh, that's fun. But it's like, I want to hear about your drinking. I want to know that you know where I've been. You've been where I've been and drank the way that I drink. I won't even listen to anything else you have to say. Or at least I wouldn't when I was new, until I knew that you knew you'd walked in my shoes a little, you know?
mhm.
So I think it's really important.
I do too. I absolutely do too. One alcoholic working with another is really where it's at. So you got sober then at the
Yeah,
time.
and I ended up with one alcoholic working with another, and his name was Ed. He was a bit of a biker dude. I didn't want him to be my sponsor. He sort of assigned himself. I didn't know that you could say no. I mean, you know, and we went to the International House of Pancakes every, you know, when I went. It was basically, he was like, you're going to go to the noon meeting, the 5:30 meeting, and the 8 o'clock meeting, and then we'll go to the International House of Pancakes. And I ended up doing this like every day, a day at a time. And sometimes at the IHOP, I would be like, I really want to drink, Ed. And he'd say, well, if you really want to drink tomorrow, I'll buy you one. You know, and I'd be like, okay. And I'd say, I really want to drink, Ed. And he'd say, well, if you really want to drink tomorrow, I'll buy you one. And I'd be like, but you said that yesterday. And he said, no, but I'll do it tomorrow. Not to, you know, tomorrow I will. Anyway, but the most important thing about him was that he just, you know, he'd get out this blue book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and we would just go through it line by line. And he'd say, do you know what this word means? And I'd be like, yeah. And he's like, what's it mean? And I'd be like, I don't know, you know, because it's like I had all the answers, but I didn't even know what the questions were really, you know. And sometimes I'd say, what's it matter that I don't know, you know? And he'd say, Philo, I want you to know what this book's mean. I want to know what, you know, every word in this book, because this is the thing that's going to save your life. You know, so we'd get out a dictionary and we'd look it up. Because, you know, and if I question them, he'd go back to the beginning of the book again. He'd be like, no, 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 remember, it says right here at the beginning of the book, the purpose of this book is to show you precisely how to recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. What's the word precisely mean again, Philo? And I'd be like, exactly. And he'd be like, yeah, that's why we're doing exactly what it says to do in the book. And I'm really lucky because, you know, it's like not everybody had that experience, but it's like I ended up in a program I didn't want to be in called Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor I didn't want named Ed, who like took me through a book I didn't want to read, but he kept buying me short stacks of pancakes. And, you know, and I would show up anywhere for a free short stack of pancakes. So it's like, you know, okay, I'll read your book with you, old guy, you know. And it's like, where's the pancakes? But somewhere along the way, it's like I got this message and we did what's said to do in the book, and there's nothing particularly special about me, you know. Sometimes I can't fathom that it's like 35 years later and I'm still sober.
Mm.
Like, wow, you know, but how grateful am I that like somebody cared enough to buy me pancakes practically every single night to make
Right.
like spoon feeding me Alcoholics Anonymous and flour with maple syrup, you know, like, okay, I'm here. And my life changed as a result of it, you know,
Absolutely, yeah.
what a gift.
I love that story because that, you know, people don't necessarily sponsor that way or are sponsored that way. Uh, we have we have a sponsorship summits here at Seattle Intergroup, and where we're talking about what it, you know, how important it is to be, you know, an effective sponsor and what that means and what to look for in a good sponsor and that sort of thing. And you know, I wonder, do you sponsor people like that when you're sponsoring?
Yeah, I mean, you know, even I was sponsee that's just turned 17 and we're going through the book again, you know. I don't think I'm a big believer in the annual, semi-annual house cleaning sort of version of AA that's in the literature a little, you know. I feel like, you know, the first time you sort of clean house, it's like, boy, I'm gonna get those things up off the carpet, I'm gonna pick up the litter, I'm gonna pick up that big, you know, everything that was dumped there, but that carpet's not really clean. You know what I mean? Like there's the walls aren't, it looks better, but it's not really clean. And I think the longer we're in AA, the more you do this work, the deeper you can get into stuff and like get, oh, let's really clean this stuff up. Plus, I think there's just things I didn't even remember when I was brand new. The longer I stayed sober, I was like, oh yeah, you know. But yeah, that's how I sponsor people, and that's how my sponsees sponsor people. But you know, I'm a big believer in that sponsorship pamphlet, questions and answers on sponsorship. It's like, it's amazing how many people are sponsors or are sponsees that have never read it.
Right.
And there's some really good things in there about like what sponsorship is and what it isn't. And I have been in those relationships at different points in my sobriety where this clearly isn't really sponsorship or whatever, but it's like, it's good to know. It's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we explore that pamphlet in the sponsorship summit, so it's pretty great. I love our literature. I love it. So tell me about steps 10 and 11 for you. What does that look like for you now?
10 and 11. Well, you know, I worked the steps with Ed. The ninth step was really amazing for me. The promises came true. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then, you know, eventually sort of what happened was I start resting on my laurels. And then I really don't need to meditate. That we'll let that go. And then maybe I won't pray so much because like, that's just, I don't have time. And then I really don't have time to like put pen to paper and figure out what my 10th step is every day because I'm just too tired by the end of the day to do that. And I know when I'm doing things wrong, I don't need to write it down, you know. And eventually it's sort of like, I don't realize I'm doing it, but I'm working the steps backwards. Like, oh, there went 11, there went 10, and now I'm, you know. And meanwhile, it's like my life starts blowing up sober and I'm the person creating it and I don't even see that I'm doing it sober until inevitably it's like, oh, got to do 90 meetings in 90 days again, like work those steps again, and the promises come true. And yeah, I love it. Woo, 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 yeah. And then inevitably it's like I'd get busy because, you know, the problem with AA and staying sober is it'll give you a life. It can give you a big one. And it's like, and it's sometimes, particularly in the first, I don't know, 15 years, it was easy for me to forget that like that life came as a result of doing these simple things. So it's like I would inevitably do it again. You know, 5 years sober, I got fired from this job for stealing. I mean, it's like I just these things, you know, it's like, oh, This stuff isn't all behavior because it's currently happening
Right,
again.
right.
And but inevitably along the way, I sort of got like, oh, this is a 12-step program, and I need to try and work all 12 of them. And if you do try and work all 12 steps, you know, it's a very different experience. It just is. It's like life is pretty stable. Even in the, even if it's blowing up around you with like a global pandemic, or I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're on Zoom now. I guess let's have lots of meetings. Let's talk to my sponsees online or whatever, it's like things can be going totally bonkers, but it's like, if I'm staying in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm feeling pretty good most of the time.
Right. I had a similar experience, and I wonder if it's getting older, kind of slowing down, getting older, realizing what's important and what's not, and having the time to meditate and making the time.
Mhm.
I don't know. It seems like the older I get, I'm not so interested in being all dramatic, having a very
Yeah,
big dramatic life.
I think too, I mean, this isn't really AA, but it's like, I come from a lot of trauma, like growing up and stuff. And then I experienced a hell of a lot as a result of my drinking. And I think it's a challenge when you're new to just be quiet and be where you are. If you've got all this post-traumatic stress lingering underneath the surface, or, and you don't really know. I remember being pretty new and saying to somebody like, I got a bunch of stuff and I don't know when I'm going to have to deal with it. And this woman in AA at St. Mark's up on Broadway, that meeting, she said, when it all will happen right on time. If it's just simmering on the stove, let it simmer, it'll boil at some point, and then you can like deal with it then. And I thought, okay, I'll just deal with it when I need to deal with it. But I think it's, for kids who come from a lot of trauma, I think it's interesting to 10 and 11 can be a little even more of a challenge, because like the whole trauma thing is sort of like not being in your body, not being here now, not being present is a safe place. And then you end up in AA and it's like, live where your feet are, and it's
Right.
like, it's interesting. I think the steps really are amazing for helping with a lot of that stuff. But the 10 and 11 part was really difficult. The more work I did on other things, the easier 10 and 11 became with me over time. So
Mhm.
maybe it's getting older, but maybe some of it is that I was getting some help on some other stuff that, outside issues, if you will, that I needed to take care of.
So I think that brings up an interesting topic to me. Is I've done some family of origin stuff early in my sobriety, but I just sort of wonder. I asked one of my sponsees this the other day. What are you getting out of therapy that the 12 steps don't provide for you, or haven't yet, or whatever? So I guess I want to pose that question to you, if that's okay. What
Mhm.
you know, I just I've seen people with very traumatic, childhoods, come into sobriety and do only 12-step work,
Mhm.
and seemingly have, come to terms with that trauma. And then I've seen people um, uh, who the 12 steps didn't address it in a way that was going to work, was going to help them get free from that trauma. And so maybe it depends on who you are or what kind of trauma or what. I'm not sure. What is your take on that?
Well, somebody early on told me that it's almost impossible to really do therapy and work the 12 steps at the same time.
Mm,
And and I kind of believe that. Like, I'm a big believer in like, let's work the 12 steps to the absolute freaking best of my ability and treat my alcoholism or whatever untreated alcoholism I have going on right now, because honestly, that's the stuff that's going to kill me. you know. And then once I'm done with that, if I've still got stuff lingering, it's like, oh, then maybe I need to see a therapist and address some of that other things now that we're sure that it's like, it's not like alcoholic related, you know. So that's been my experiences. You know, I've had to seek outside help a variety of different times and over the years. And you know, but like I said, like when the pot boiled, and it was like, oh, okay, now I guess it's time. And that's sort of my experience, is just, you know, I think everything in AA sort of happens right on time and right in its own special sort of, you know, universal driven, synchronistic sort of weirdly magical and kind of way, you know. You know, and we show up for it, and when we're ready, the teacher will appear, and all that sort of stuff that happens. It's like it happens in outside AA, dealing with outside AA stuff as well. But for me, I really find that like I have to be really grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous all the time, because that I have a disease called alcoholism, which is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And it is going to want, you know, it'll settle for me being miserable in sobriety if it can't kill me. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I got to take care of that first and foremost. And so, and back in when I got sober, which is 1987, you know, there weren't as many other 12-step programs or other things out there for people to deal with all their other issues. So if you had an issue, you worked 12 steps on it in AA. But that doesn't take care of, you know, things that are organically wrong. You know, it's just, and the book's clear on that. Like we are, you know, we do not have a monopoly on therapy. And there's things I've had to do outside of AA to deal with some of my other stuff.
So we met at a conference recently because we have a common career. And so is that part of, do you want to talk about that at all? Do you want to talk about that being part of being grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous? Is that part of that for you?
Well, I think the fact that I'm very rooted in AA. And I mean, like when the pandemic happened, my first thought was like, how can I be of service? I got it, like, ooh, I'm starting the West Hollywood Speaker Slam, and we're going to be having like 10 speakers every Saturday and Sunday once a month. And we're going to be, you know, like have marathons and like, because people would say like, wow, that's so great that you're doing all this for everyone. And I'm like, I'm not really doing this for everyone. I'm doing this for me. I mean, I am, but I'm not, you know, but it's like, no, I'm doing this for me because I got to stay in the middle of the boat. I got to stay sober. I got to be in the solution because I know how my wacky mind works when things go wrong. You know, and it's like, let's be a force for trying to help other people and let's be of maximum service to God and to our fellows. Okay, let's do it. Woo woo. You know, and that's resulted. I mean, I think a lot of that is just sort of like, you know, when the position came open at Los Angeles Central Office, and you know, people were like, Philo, you should apply, you know. And so, I mean, I think I'm in this role. I think I'm in this role because I'm so grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not that this role is grounding me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm really clear that, you know, I'm a special worker. You know what I mean? Like I literally get paid to like help people in Alcoholics Anonymous and help people find meetings and do all this stuff, which is pretty phenomenal. Like I didn't see it coming, really. It was like very unexpected, you know, and I've been in this position now for 1.5 years, but oh, it's just yeah, I mean, this is not my recovery,
Right.
you know. And I'm a secretary on Friday nights at a meeting, and I get a speaker at another Tuesday night meeting I get the speakers for, and I have a greeter commitment, because
Mhm.
it's like I saw, and people are sort of like, you're always doing everything. And I'm like, I'm really not. It's like I am 35 years sober, but it's like I've seen those people. Early on, there was this guy I knew who had like 35 years or something. And he went out and drank, and he died about 6 months later. And somebody was talking to his wife and said, like, well, what do you think happened? And she said, oh, he was so busy being 35 years sober that he forgot to be sober today. And it's like, oh, wow. Yeah, one day at a time, honey. We're only doing this one day at a time. And regardless of what I'm doing for work these days, I gotta show up and I gotta take my sponsee through. Well, let's read more about alcoholism for the 150th. It's like, and because it's what we do. I think everything I do in AA, even still on some level, I sort of like, do you want to do that? And it's like, not really. But whenever I do it, I always think, oh, I'm so glad I did. Do you want to speak at this meeting? Do you want to drive to Redlands? Do you want to come here? And it's like, no, but I'll say yes, because we don't know what's going to happen when we say yes. When I moved to Los Angeles, I had a really hard time finding a sponsor. I was like 20, how sober was I then? Like 28, I think. And there was people that had more time, and I was calling them and they weren't calling me back. And so this newcomer who had 90 days said, I'll sponsor you, Philo. And I said, okay, why not? And they said, call me every day. Go to a meeting every day. And I said, okay, thank you, I'll do that. And then I was asked to speak at this meeting in Alhambra at 5 o'clock on a Friday. And if you know LA traffic, that's just, like, I'd rather put a cigarette out on my arm than try and, but it's like, yes, so I called him and I said, what am I supposed to do? I don't want to speak at this meeting on Friday at 5 o'clock. And he said, Philo, do you know what happens when you say no? And I said, I think so. And he said, exactly. You know exactly what's going to happen when you say no. But you know what's might happen if you say yes? And I said, he says, you have no idea. You could show up. You could meet the love of your life at that meeting in Alhambra. You could find a new sponsee. You could save someone's life you never would have fathomed. And, there'll be you could find a best friend and I was like, okay, I get it, but it's like, but it's so true. And I still think about that, even though, I ended up getting a sponsor with a lot more time, like not a few weeks later or something, but it's like just that little piece of wisdom from that newcomer about just saying yes in Alcoholics Anonymous is like still carries with me all the time. Like, I don't really want to do that, but yes, I will.
Right.
Yes, I will.
Much like this interview, probably, right?
I really want to do your podcast, and yes, I will. I love you. You're great, and I'm excited to hang out with and chat with you. So it's good to be here, and I'm honored that you even asked. So thanks for including me.
Well, I love your energy, and I love your story, and I love people that got sober young, and so I had a great time at the conference we were at, and I loved meeting you, and I appreciate you sharing yourself with us today.
Thanks. It was an interesting weekend, wasn't it?
It was great. It was great, and topped it off with a game to the Rockies. That was fun.
Yeah, and and to be up here in Seattle for this thing, and it's like it's not raining. Normally I've been coming up to like take care of my parents or something who have now passed, but it's been a long time since I've been here when it's nice.
Yeah.
It's like in Seattle, it's so amazing when it's nice. And I'd forgotten how wonderful Seattle is. And it's been really cool to kind of see that again this trip. And like, oh yeah, Seattle this time of year, there's nothing better in the world. Nothing better.
Well, LA is pretty amazing too. And but definitely we should you tell us when you're going to come up here next. And we will schedule you for the Seattle group speaker. That'd be really great.
Okay.
All right. Philo, have a wonderful day.
You too.